It's close enough. All right, we'll call this meeting of the Port of Hood River Commission to order. A couple commissioners are on their way. I'll be here in just a minute. Before we get into anything really. Are there any modifications from staff tonight?
There is one under 4D bridge replacement project update. That can be an informational report.
Okay.
And then that's it aside from any consent items.
Okay, from staff, we're gonna move, or excuse me, from commission, we're gonna move consent C and D down to quick discussion item.
Okay.
You know, and if I could jump in, we may want to do the donation and fee waiver policy as well.
Sure.
Because I think there was some comments, but Heather's not here yet.
So we'll move F as well.
C, D, and F, we'll go to.
And consent item, you have a new attachment, copy of.
Right.
Sound good? Okay.
Okay.
Was there any public comment this evening? Okay. Then, can a motion to pass the consent agenda with the noted changes.
Mr. President, I can motion to approve the consent agenda with the modification and changes by staff.
I second.
In favor?
Aye.
As well. All right. Consent will pass. Move to the one. Okay, Kevin, which presentations? you
Yes, so
start?
let's see, here are our guests, Scott Rainier from Columbia is going to be making a couple of introductions, and this is going to be focused on the bridge insurance policy that we would be following up with an action. So Scott, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good evening. Sorry that Christy and Heather aren't here. They'll probably be here for the best part, which is these guys. As I look around tonight, I recognize most of the folks, also not everybody has been in this room, you know, and support staff, so a lot of new folks. The relationship between the Port of Hood River and its insurance carrier for the bridge, we were just discussing this back longer than my tenure really at Columbia River Insurance. To the best that we can calculate, the relationship between the Port of Hood River and Chubb Insurance for issues surrounding the bridge probably is a 40-year relationship. I have been helping with this relationship for the last 25 years. Initially, I stepped into a role where there was a broker in Portland that worked on the bridge and they wanted someone local. I became that person. After a few years of working with that particular broker, we saw an opportunity to work with a different broker in Portland that had more expertise actually around marine insurance. And we took that opportunity to partner with Derman Bates. And so Dave is here tonight from Derman Bates Insurance. And then to sort of round out the entire relationship, Brendan is here, he works for Chubb Insurance. I'm going to kind of let them give you the lay of the land. The one thing that I would share about this long relationship is on occasion, we have had the ability to sort of not just stand in this room and represent the Port of Hood River, but there have been situations a few years ago when we thought the bridge had been hit. And it really does speak to sort of the relationship between the staff, the commissioners, the long relationship with Chubb Insurance, the broker in Portland in our office. I think I was going to ask you before, so I don't say this incorrectly, but it was during that process with the elision that the port as a whole ended its relationship with one of its engineering firms and ended up partnering, am I correct, with Chubb's longtime engineering firm, which is still the firm that you guys rely on today. So sorry, stop talking. And I'm gonna let the guys that actually know what's up speak. So
You bet.
all right.
So I know in your packet, you had a copy of the full proposal for the renewal for the bridge. My name is Dave Hearns. I've been with Durham Bates for 22 years and I've worked with Columbia River and the port for 15 years personally. So I handle property insurance in our agency. That's my specialty. And so I work just on the bridge portion of your insurance. So that is the only part of the program we're going to discuss this evening. So to Scott's point, long-term relationship, we believe in the kind of three-legged stool of underwriting, brokerage, and insurance. So that's why Brendan's here from Chubb. And feel free to jump in if I get anything wrong on the renewal. But some of the key elements to the renewal, I kind of want to give a little bit of history. From 2020 to 2023, you were on a 3-year kind of a rate lock program with Chubb. One of the kind of interesting things that happened in 2020 was we locked into this 3-year term and nobody knew what the next 3 years were gonna look like. Nobody knew there was gonna be this crazy pandemic. Nobody knew that the market for insurance was gonna go to hell in a handbasket. So we really got fortunate to have locked in this 3-year term on the cost of kind of a historical situation, both with insurance and then of course, just generally speaking. So we had this 3 years of just the only changes that we really needed to make were to look at the values of the bridge. And so if you think about the premiums, it's really a function of two things. It's the values against the rate. So the rate is that. So the only thing that changed during those 3 years were values of the bridge. Those are a function of Chubb utilizes an engineering risk kind of program, and Brendan can speak more to that, but essentially it's showing material very specific to industrial replacement costs. And so the functionality of that is ensuring that what we set as the value of the bridge is close to what we would expect the insurance proceeds to need to really have a replacement. So that 3 years is very kind of calm through a very stormy time. And then we just came out of that 3-year cycle this year. So negotiations with Chubb started anew. 3-year terms no longer exist. You can't lock into that. I think they learned probably the hard way that not maybe the best way to manage that. So they are one of the few insurance companies, very few insurance companies that still are offering some form of a multi-year agreement. So we have proposed a 2-year agreement for this renewal cycle. The engineering risk report that we use for valuation of the bridge came back at 5.7%. So the proposal is to take the values of the bridge and the pedestrian bridge up 5.7%. The other component of that is loss of revenue, which you guys insure 3 years of. And so those are numbers that you give us. Combine those together, 10% was the rate that was proposed for this term for this next year. So that 10% is still well within market conditions. We look at the industry and what the rest of the market is proposing and has been doing. So we had kind of a nice flow for 3 years. 10% is still very aggressive. Chubb's one of the few companies that write bridges. So not a lot of competition. Then the second year agreement would be basically a rate cap. So we don't have flat rate, but what Chubb has proposed is that in year 2, 6.5% would be the max for year 2. And that's just a cap that we lock in. So we have the ability to stay within that. If the market conditions were to change, we could.
Yeah, there's always the option to renegotiate if it was, if things dramatically differ. But basically you're guaranteed that we would go no higher than the 6.5 for beginning on 2024. So we would just review the values again and look at the ENR construction cost index, what Dave was referring to. It's a national number that we use looks at the 20 largest cities across the country and uses the different factors for materials, labor, etc. So that's kind of the standard that we use for all of our what we call engineer risk policies around the country. So
And I think what we've done is utilize the national number, which is actually more beneficial. The local, if you look at Seattle, Portland, that figure is actually larger.
You know, there's no Portland, it's only Seattle,
Yeah.
so we talked many years ago about using the national figure, which averages that out, because it's, you know, Hood River is not Seattle, so. we
Could,
settled on
could I ask you a couple of questions along that line?
Sure.
When I read through your proposal, I go back and look at potentials, and I've got two scenarios that I'd like to talk about. One is we have a problem with the lift span, and it gets locked up and not in the proper position. And we're gonna go spend a bunch of money to try and fix it. What do you cover? The way I read this, you'll cover up to $500,000. But you have exclusions in here. My question is, if that rack was caused by corrosion of the members, is that an exclusion? So you don't pay anything for it?
From corrosion.
Yeah, as an example, lift cables, we know are getting old, we gotta replace them. But if tomorrow one of those lift cables fails and it's because of corrosion, will you pay for the fix on the lift span?
I'd have to go read it, I'd have to get back to you on the question, to be honest with you, and look at the exact policy language and read it and talk with our claims, because I don't typically get into claim scenarios.
But so first of all, the 500,000, just to point out, is a deductible. For the list. Are you looking at page 13 of the proposal?
Yeah, 13 and 14.
Okay, so.
Oh, you're right,
Kind of-
deductible,
so
first
that's the
500,000,
deductible
okay.
for the lift span.
But let's say, I mean, anything that happens to that thing's gonna be over $1 million.
So
Right.
I guarantee it. So you got a deductible of 500,000. If the span failed because of corrosion on the lift cables, will you pay? And when I look at exclusions,
I don't do claims either, you know, I'm not gonna say that in that example here. But I will say that in a property insurance policy, those kinds of things, wear, tear, decay, if it isn't as sudden an accidental claim. Property insurance is not designed to pay maintenance.
okay, so when I look at page 14, and I
Mhm.
think we should look at page 14, there's a ton of exclusions here that we may think we're buying some protection based on the age of our bridge, we may not be buying anything.
So one thing I was gonna mention is that general repair is almost always excluded, so wear and tear, maintenance, those types of issues, that is not what insurance addresses in almost any form whatsoever. Insurance is based on to cover sudden and accidental event. So, someone runs it on the islands, covered event. Under the issue of corrosion on the cables, something like that. Part of what goes into this process is the engineering reports that are done through the port and then provided to the insurance carrier. And so in those reports, there is some consideration under the condition of the bridge. And so if those reports were indicating that work, if those cables were in such a condition they needed to be replaced, and the port did not obligate themselves to replace them, the policy would not be made available.
Okay, so the second condition is we have a vehicle on the bridge that runs through the guardrail and ends up in the river. What is the coverage that we would probably get off of this policy for that event? And talk us through that.
Well, you'd have to be a little bit more specific into which portion of so you're talking about the damage to the bridge or the potential liability of how the car made it through the guardrail and into the water?
All the above.
So I don't know, I mean, even if it were a tractor trailer. The amount of damage it may or may not create going into the water would be subject then.
Well, the property insurance for the bridge would absolutely. Absolutely, because it's sudden and accidental. So if a vehicle, or we had the collision, if the ship hits the bridge. And it's determined that damage was caused by a sudden and accidental event such as the vehicle hitting the bridge. As long as it was excess of the deductible, the property insurance would respond to that. I can't speak to the liability.
Yeah, and so the liability piece would certainly address any cause of action that came back against the port.
So if-
It's a separate policy, that's through special districts, but it would
Okay.
address the protection.
So that is not covered under this insurance,
The liability, so if somehow the car went through the guardrail and out into the water
right?
and
Person died,
the person dies and the estate for that person comes back and says it was the port's fault that this car made it through and into the water, that would be special districts that would represent and defend the port.
okay, so then the kind of the follow-on action to this is that. The reason why the car got through the guardrail is that unbeknownst to us. The structure had failed. Because of age. Now, is that for the bridge, is that a maintenance issue? That then it would not be covered?
On the property side or on the?
Yeah, on the
liability side?
property side. I understand the liability goes to a different insurance.
There probably is segregation. Honestly, you analyze the four corners of the column. I guess the four corners of the column is how we describe it. So a component of that, the damage done by the truck.
Mhm.
Is different than the damage that existed to the bridge because of lack of maintenance and repair. So there would be some. That would involve this collision that happened years ago or suspected collision that happened and claim that was very difficult to prove whether that damage was actually. New or had been there and had been exacerbated for years from vessels hitting that portion of the bridge. We ended up, I mean, the process is very complex, but at the end of the day, we ended up flying back to Chubb's headquarters on the East Coast in Philadelphia. Had representatives on both sides of basically settlement.
Dave, I got a question for you in regard to our assets. How does Chubb look at it in regards to video cameras? Do you look at that as an asset to our asset that you can go ahead and charge the appropriate party for the damage done? I mean,
Sure, so it's called subrogation, which is the ability to recover from a negligent party for a claim. So if we have the ability to do that. Insurance companies, including Chubb, have what's called the right but not the duty, so they can go back, and if the claims big enough, they're absolutely going to search everywhere they can. Which was something in that case we were trying to hunt down.
right, we never had them. Well, my point being is for the commission is we should maybe look more into technology to cover our butt and to help you
Right.
assist you in your investigations.
Right, and then that recovery comes back twofold because it's actually monies that Chubb recovers.
Correct.
At the end of the claim. But on a pro rata basis, any deductibles that are owed back to the board that are recovered in that subrogation process go back to you as well.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
So in terms of the balance of this proposal, I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of where we got the values, where we got the rate. Where the premium came from, it's just a multiplication of those two numbers, which generated that, roughly 19% increase in premium year over year. I think there's absolutely no downside to a second year commitment. I say commitment, that's really not the right word, because all it's doing is granting you the ability to cap that second year rate. And if something changes next year and the market conditions, we don't expect the market conditions are gonna get better. If you look at the historical wildfires, hurricanes, the storms that are going, California, the stuff that's going on in Northern California, I think property is gonna skyrocket next year. So capping your rate at 6.5%, I think is very prudent. And if something were to happen where you were able to get something more aggressive, then you're not locked in.
So maybe one thing that would be helpful too is that we do have the paper, I'm gonna hand it out, but if you were to look at the last 10 years. Sort of the valuation of the bridge, the cost of the insurance, the rate increase over the last decade. Did I just steal where you were headed?
Well, yeah, fundamentally Chubb's an underwriting company, so they're not following huge gaps, peaks and valleys. What they're trying to do is set rate at a reasonable amount, and they're trying to underwrite to the account and specific exposures. They're trying to be partners, and I think 40 years would cement that comment. But what you do is you look at the average per Chubb and you don't see big peaks and valleys, you see kind of like the moderation of rate year over year. And if you look at the last 10 years, the average rate increase was 1.3%. You can't say that about other industries and other carriers. Because what you see is they're following those market conditions all the time and taking rate and then having to get beat up. And so it's that sort of constant back and forth. And if you look at the history, that's not the case with the Port and Shell.
Guys, in regard to the physical damage validation or valuation, that number is actual cost value minus any deductions, is that right?
So the 148
million.
million, I
Yeah,
guess,
148 million.
Property damage is a function of our best guess of what the insurance proceeds would be to replace the bridge if it were to suffer a catastrophic loss. With the exception of earthquake, because that's capped at 50 million. If you look at the report, but essentially that's been a number we've been chasing for years.
So it went up $8 million. Is that a formula you used from last year? It was 140 million, now it's 148 million. Is there a
That's
formula?
that engineered.
That is the-
Okay.
Okay. So Toby, maybe a little bit more into that. Because knowing that you guys are going through the process and you are looking at replacing the bridge and you understand what the actual cost of the bridge reconstruction looks like. Clearly, this number isn't a real representation of that number. What this number, in my history of working on this, represents, it represents a number that initially the port felt comfortable with, that if something completely disabled the bridge and that work needed to be done or it needed to be replaced, that it were proceeds that would help the port sort of find an equilibrium in their scenario. I don't think that there should be anyone in this room that feels that $149 million is going to allow the port to rebuild a bridge. That number remains sort of this number in flux of what we kind of agreed to a long time ago, and then the values increased over time. The other side of this is that based on the age of the bridge, the condition of the bridge, if we were to put the correct replacement cost to it, the insurance premiums would be to a place that would be
Double, triple.
Sure.
likely triple what they are now. And so it is a bit more of a balance. And we shouldn't be confused that this represents a true replacement cost.
That's why I brought it up, because I want to make sure it's that actual value cost, not an actual replacement cost.
Right, and that's another factor of the relationship with Chubb, that they understand that and they're comfortable with that number. And we're not having to, take that to a level of what would be potentially true replacement cost of 2-3 times, whatever the number is,
Right.
and then consequently pay an exponential premium against that value.
The one number in the proposal that is accurate, the revenue replacement over the 3-year, that is a number that is based on information that came from staff for the forecast of the next 36 months. So that number is sort of as trued up as possible.
You mean the $5 million one?
No, 22 million.
Okay, 20, good.
And that's an option, that's a selection that the port has historically insured 3 years of revenue. So effectively, the insurance company paying the revenue from the toll that you wouldn't have if you didn't have a sort of. What kind of time frame would we want to insure against if we were at 0 during a replacement project?
How sensitive is the bill if we would say instead of 3 years, 2 years?
So it's basically the math. I don't, it on your end, is the rate different for the business interruption or? Roughly the same?
We do use 2 different rates, but then we come up with a composite rate. So the rate would still be applied against the 2-year business income figure. So we
What I'm sorry. The revenue figure that we gave you is based on 3 years of
Right.
revenue. What's the sensitivity if we made that 2 years?
So the premium would go down basically on the same rate of the 22 cents per hundred. I mean, it's just a math problem. You take it down to what 2 years worth of revenue would be, and you just
Versus
apply
3.
that rate instead, and that's your sort of.
So it would come down by basically, I think, by 30.
no, not the total premium. Whatever it's, how much is the DI figure? I forget.
23.
Yeah, so if it was, you take 8 million off of your
Right.
Total insured
Right.
value, and then multiply that new total insured value by your policy rate, which was 21 cents and change. And whatever that.
So,
annual
so
premium
the
is.
savings is 21 cents times 8
I'd say
million.
8 million, roughly 8 million reduced out of it, yeah, I think,
8 million divided by 100.
yes. So, yeah. that would- Quickly do the math off, by the way.
Yeah, our actual.
It's a, that can't be right. That's $160,000 roughly.
No.
So,
So
yeah,
you have to divide the 8 million by 100.
Yeah, because it's based on annual or $100 in value.
okay, so that's 80,000.
17,500 bucks and.
Okay,
If we were to reduce that, yeah, it's a 2-year.
If you took like $8 million off.
yeah. So you'd reduce the bill by 17 grand, plus or minus a little bit.
Closer.
And then you're lowering your recovery time to 24 months versus there's a period of indemnity right now of 3 years, 36 months. So you'd only be able to recover 2 years worth of income coverage if there was a major loss that caused.
But if we had, and we're just doing a scenario here, if we had a major loss. We still have to fuss about, okay, what caused it? And if it was degradation of the bridge because of age. Then we're probably gonna get into an argument whether you pay or not. Because theoretically, why didn't you maintain it better? So,
One is subject to.
well, yeah,
Have the physical damage component of the claim, you don't get the loss of that.
But you guys take into consideration the fact that we do regular engineering reports, we do regular inspections, and so it shows that we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, we don't insure, like if it gets to we had another insured in a different part of the state that a couple of bridges went below us, they were poor rated, and we just don't insure that. So yes, we do take that into account and offer the coverage if it wasn't maintained to an adequate level.
so how do you define poor rating?
The bridge inspection report,
Do you go on the SUI?
I don't have that answer for you. I'd have to go talk to it because I reviewed.
Because when you read the report, it's not real impressive. It's rated pretty low,
On this bridge.
yes.
Might
When
be a
you
phone
say.
call.
Okay.
So.
I think we've got to do a little more discussion here.
No, I think that's just, so part of it's pressure critical is one of the main elements, like if it's, we had a couple that were pressure critical that. We're just not gonna insure until there is maintenance or the elements that were deemed necessary to repair those.
And we do that, but the bridge continues to age and the rating continues to fall, which we expect.
Yeah,
Well, you have
But
an
where is it
engineering-
where-
an Engineering division that reviews those documents.
yeah,
So he's the underwriter for Chubbs for the bridge. The engineering reports go to your engineering department.
yeah.
They then basically provide the yes or the no to you as to how things move forward.
Okay, so with this proposal, you've done that homework and you're satisfied that this, you'll stand behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Good questions. So how do you get the reports, the fracture critical reports?
Historically, we've requested them from the person in your role or one of staff. And it basically transfers through us to them.
Gotcha, so staff provides you that, thank you.
Was there anything else in the proposal that we didn't cover, any question? I mean, that's 36,000.
Commissioner Fox, you had a question about some of the. There was another question.
no, I'm fine. I understand where we are.
Okay.
And appreciate you guys providing the answers and the discussion. It was very helpful to me.
You guys raised the physical damage coverage to 8 million and 5 million for revenue. Was that a mathematical figure you did or inflation factor you put in there or to raise it?
For the physical damage on the bridge itself, that's that engineering report that shows a number that says cost of labor and materials 5.7%.
Okay.
That's where that comes from. The business interruption number you give to us.
Okay.
Those are calculated by your office in terms of currently 3 years. Block of revenue.
And the value we use there, that it's Engineering News and Record, which is a published magazine or a resource. And so we could, I could direct you to where that is, but they publish on a monthly basis, you know, what the costs and the increase in, or theoretically a decrease, but the labor and materials of the average of 20 major cities across the country. And so that's where we use that 5.7% increase from last year. This point in time. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the only other question I had, I mean, it sounds from the report, this terrorism option, you kind of put it to the side of you can or can't do it. From your recommendation or your expertise, are a lot of bridges starting to participate in that coverage, or is it kind of one of those? It's a really hard thing to report, and I thought it has to be over 200 million, and
Yes, it's a fairly nebulous insurance because it's literally never been used. It
Okay.
really stemmed from September 11th, and
Mhm.
we've never had an event to challenge or utilize that coverage. So I would say from my experience in the Pacific Northwest region, that we have very few people who buy terrorism insurance unless it's required of a third party. It's so cheap as it would be foolish not to buy it, or because you identify your risk as a specific target. But I think in this area and the Bridge Pacific, the discussion before has been, you know, we're not part of something bigger where an event would occur and we would be part of a very large certified terrorist act. So that decision has always been made.
We're federally required to offer it as an optional coverage, so we have to offer it on any quote that we provide.
I think we initially did it right after 9/11.
Mhm.
Commission did it, and then I think 2 years later, next policy, we said.
And I think it is important to note that since that date, there has yet to be an event that has generated anything around it.
okay.
If I had to choose between spending that money on terrorism and another year of business interruption coverage, I do the business interruption.
Good.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys so much.
There's a potential action item here. It's gonna go down to C. It's not listed on the agenda, but that's gonna be when I get to it at C.
Oh, I must have.
Okay, you can hang out, listen to me talk.
Insomnia.
You want to learn about the bike trailer, Bill? I do too. Kevin?
Great, let's see.
Chris, come pick your husband up.
So, Tara, are you available?
Hi there. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Tara is the ODOT employee that is in charge of the historic US 30 bike pedestrian project. And I believe the commission in November requested an update on the bike ped trail. And so Tara was nice enough to join us. Tara, do you have your presentation? You should be able to share the screen.
Yeah, give me one. I'm trying to juggle screens here, so just give me a minute.
And the slides aren't in your packet, I don't believe, just a memo.
All right. Can everyone see the historic Columbia River Highway State Trail Journey to Reconstruction?
Yeah.
Great. So my name is Tara Lingley. Thank you for the introduction. I am the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Transportation. And ODOT is charged with reconnecting and restoring the historic Columbia River Highway as a bicycle and pedestrian facility per the 1986 Gorge National Scenic Area Act. So it's been a 30 some odd year experience, 36 years, and we've made a lot of progress. So wanted to come here and share with you today, talk about what's currently under construction and what our plans are for the future. So we are working to develop this world-class destination. The goal is to create a facility for cyclists, hikers, and strollers to come experience the Columbia River Gorge in the way it's meant to be seen, kind of along that historic meandering highway. And like I said, it's been a 36-year process. We have been working very hard. There is, it will be, when all is said and done, it'll be a 72 mile connection between Troutdale and the Dalles. And so you can see on this map here, there are some sections that are actually shared with vehicles. So there are some drivable segments of the historic Columbia River Highway. And then there are some sections that were disconnected or destroyed during the construction of I-84 in the 1950s. That we've had to work very hard and very diligently with our project partners to reconnect. So we have three separate, distinct bicycle and pedestrian only segments. The first one on the west here is what we call the Bonneville segment because it's right adjacent to the Bonneville Dam. That is fully complete. We have the Mitchell Point segment here in the middle, which we're currently working on. You may have noticed the traffic impacts from that this past summer. Apologies for that. And then on the eastern end, we have what we call the Twin Tunnel. So between Hood River and Mosier, that section has been intact and open since 2000. The Bonneville segment, it was one of the first segments that we've worked on, and then most recently completed, I believe in 2015 was the last segment to go in on that. So two fully completed intact segments, and then the one in the middle, which is the hardest and most challenging. Of course, we saved the best for last. So we have our, what we call our 3 R's, which I think got expanded to 4 during the pandemic. So we have remember. So the historic Columbia River Highway was built between 1913 and 1922. It was the first highway with design standards. It was modeled after Europe's great roads. We want to remember and be true to kind of that historic nature of the highway. So this is kind of the vision from the engineer, is that everyone will come from all over and look at the wild grandeur of the gorge. So we try and stay true to that. And then restore. So as I mentioned before, in the 1950s, we had the water level route, which is now I-84, start construction, and it was a faster, straighter, wider than the historic Columbia River Highway, but it also served to disconnect the intact segments. You know, I-84 is a straight line. The historic Columbia River Highway meandered and took advantage of topography and views. So we have these random little loops kind of stuck off into the woods, if you will, or towards the river that we've been working to reconnect as part of the state trail. So the idea is to restore these segments, connect as much as possible to the existing pavement that we know is out there, and create this new state trail. It's mostly just a pretty picture. The other piece, the really sad piece of that 1950s water level route was the destruction of the historic Mitchell Point Tunnel. So you see here what it looked like prior to being blasted for the water level route. You can see there's not a lot of room in this location. So when I-84 went in at the base of this rock outcropping, it really did remove where the tunnel was. And we remove these lovely viaducts. And the fun thing about this historic picture is you can see there's actually a bicycle parked up against the white or the railing here. So cyclists use this from its inception. Another really cool shot of the inside of the historic tunnel, the features were these adits or windows into the tunnel to provide light, to provide air, and also they make really good picture frames out for the view out into the gorge, both up and down. Then we're hoping to reconnect. So the restore part is to bring the existing segments back up into spec and usable for all folks, and then to reconnect those so folks of all ages and abilities can get out there. Also cute kids. So the remaining segment that we have, so a lot of the Mitchell Point segment is already completed. You may recall in 2019, we had the grand opening of what we call the Wyeth to Lindsay Creek segment. So from the Wyeth Trailhead, hopefully you can all see my mouse, but kind of east of Cascade Locks, the segment goes all the way, and when the Wyeth to Lindsay Creek segment was complete, it provided a continuous connection between the Wyeth Trailhead all the way into Viento State Park, into Starvation Creek. And then the Mitchell Point segment is the Mitchell Point Tunnel, which I have much better construction photos of the modern piece going in. But we're also working concurrently on the Viento to Mitchell Point segment. These are two of the remaining 3 segments, and I'll talk a little bit about what's left to do. So again, kind of the marquee elements of the State Trail is kind of recalling that historic construction, the aesthetics. So we have a lot of the masonry rail with those those iconic arches in them. We've had to add some safety features. So the vertical bars keep the users safe, also small children and dogs from kind of jumping out inappropriately on these. But we also have concrete railing, we have wooden railing where appropriate, and we're very conscious of our aesthetic impact within the gorge and then along the state highway or State Trail, excuse me. And then revive. When all is connected and said and done, the State Trail will be this artery to revive communities impacted by first the Eagle Creek fire and now kind of the depression of COVID. It'll really draw folks out and bring people out to the gorge in a way that they don't need a vehicle. We're also working on public transit connections at the same time to be able to provide a fully car-free experience through the State Trail. And that includes bicycle recreationalists. Cyclists spend a lot of money while they're using these corridors. They stop and get coffee. At the end of the day, they get beer, they stay the night in hotels, etc. So we've quantified it. We need to update our numbers because our latest is from 2013, but there's an economic impact here too. And then just happy recreational folks, and the fact that it is really accessible to users of all abilities. It's paved, it's 12 feet wide generally with 2-foot gravel shoulders on each end. We try and keep the grades to be ADA compliant, make sure that all users and all abilities can use it. All right, and so now we're going to get into the fun photos of construction. So this is the Mitchell Point Tunnel currently under construction. This is kind of an older photo, but you can see we have not yet added concrete in the base of the tunnel, but all of the structural work, the tunnel is fully blasted, it's fully connect. All of the adits or the windows have been excavated. We've added in structural shotcrete. So this is concrete that was sprayed that had metal fibers in to help strengthen the rock. When we blasted the original tunnel, when we blasted the original tunnel off, and then when we blasted this new tunnel, that rock has been jiggled a lot, and it has a lot of cracks and needs a little bit of extra help to hold together. So there's rock bolts, there's the structural shotcrete, and then there's this kind of aesthetic colored dark concrete to match with the aesthetic requirements in the National Scenic Area. So just a refresher on where this is. This is Mitchell Point. The project actually includes the parking lot. So there was a parking lot at exit 58. We'll be rehabbing that. The section of trail leading up to the tunnel, and then a section of trail to the east to connect it into the existing Mitchell Point Drive. Construction began in 2020 and is anticipated to be complete sometime in spring 2024. And it's costing for construction, it's around $25 million to date, though I anticipate that may fluctuate a bit as we continue. So there are 2 entrances. There's an east portal and a west portal. into the tunnel. This is the west entrance. So this is how you access the tunnel from the parking lot. You can see the steel arches here. And that's because the western portal, the rock was less competent, which is a nice way of saying it was really fractured and not as structural as the other side. So these steel sets, along with the shotcrete, and this will have a concrete liner over it, will help make sure that the tunnel continues to serve the visitors. And then this is a little bit further into the tunnel with our one of the adits, one of the windows into the tunnel, looking out towards those steel arches. Ooh, sorry, fast forwarding here. And then on the other side, again, we'll be adding the masonry guardrail that will protect users from falling off the cliff onto I-84 below. So you can see we're setting up the arch sets. Then they put in some concrete blocks, and then they add the masonry fascia on top and do the concrete on the top and the bottom. And this is on the west end. There'll be a lookout here on the left. You can see some of our tour folks. We try and get folks out to see the tour, to see the construction of all of our partners, all of interested parties and folks that can help us continue to find money. So this will be kind of a plaza area with masonry along the edge, so you can stop and look out up and down the gorge. And then again, this is one of our adits, kind of creating that picture frame out for views out into the gorge that haven't been seen in 70 years because the old tunnel was blasted away and not in use for the past 70. On the east side, similarly, there'll be a rest and pause area. This is, again, the form liner going in, the masonry support, or the concrete support that will then have masonry on it. And then this is a little bit of the masonry work ongoing. The eastern portal, you can see some of the big rock masonry going in to get into completing this arch. There's also some form work and concrete work that's happening. A little bit more on the nuts and bolts, and that will be the plaque over the tunnel when all is said and done. The next segment is Viento to Mitchell Point. So this is the segment just initially to the west. We have funding to take this from Viento to Perham Creek, which is about 70% of the state of that segment to get us to Mitchell Point. And actually today we got notice that we have construction funding to finish it up. Hopefully in 2026 or 2027, we'll have a fully complete Viento to Mitchell Point. And then Mitchell Point will be done a number of years before that. So we have some lovely rockery walls. The trail will go in between these two. We're also rehabilitating the Viento maintenance area for OPRD, as well as expanding the facilities there to deal with an expanded Viento campground. This is the new bathroom, the form liner, the forms going in. And then the story for Viento to Mitchell Point is rockfall, rockfall, rockfall. We have a lot of really steep cliffs directly adjacent to where the trail will go, as well as I-84. So we've done a lot of rock scaling to remove any loose rock that could fall while contractors are working below. And we have to have pretty elaborate rock catchment systems during construction to make sure that everyone remains safe and the traveling public down below. We've also done a couple of rolling slowdowns and some intermittent lane closures to accommodate the work. People pointing at things and vests. This is the best part of my job, is getting out to look at the construction process. And then the final segment is to bring us home. So Mitchell Point on this map is on the far left here. Mitchell Point Drive is actually the old alignment of the historic highway. Users will be on Mitchell Point Drive, which is an ODOT owned road, but is a local service at this point in time and will remain so. And then we're currently in design to bring this from where folks get back onto I-84 and the undercrossing of I-84 around Ruthton Point, where we have a segment of existing historic highway pavement. into the city of Hood River and into what is currently Ruthven Park, but will become the Ruthven Trailhead for the Historic Highway State Trail. And we're currently working with the county of Hood River to transfer that park from county control to OPRD, who will maintain and operate once we are constructed. So for this segment, we have 2 grant applications submitted, both a Federal Lands Access Program grant, and judging by the fact that I didn't hear today, I don't think we were successful in that round. But we also have a nationally significant federal and tribal lands program grant in, which is the cover that you see here on this slide. We'll be at about 50% design by the end of 2024, and for the low cost of $51 million. We can go ahead and construct that final segment. And thank you very much. That's it for me. I am happy to answer questions, and you see my contact information on the screen here.
Thank you. Do you have
Thank
any
you.
questions?
Yeah, Tara, Commissioner Strike, do you have a projected grand opening date that you anticipate the whole completion will be open?
That is dependent on funding, and finding $51 million is a monumental task, as the state trail is a monumental task. So I unfortunately do not. I'm hopeful that we'll be successful in the nationally significant federal and tribal lands program. But if successful, the funding will be allocated until 2024, 2025, and then it's probably a 2.5 year construction period.
Terry, you mentioned that you had the economic impact numbers of 2013.
Yes.
When do you anticipate a more current? That was one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
We feel it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
It's carbon free. You know, a family of 4 can go from Troutdale to the Dalles on the
Yeah.
weekend and back. Good revenue stream for us. We want to be proactive and work with you and how to assist you with the influx of tourism. Do you,
Sure.
any idea when those numbers will be available?
Well, so Travel Oregon on our behalf hired Dean Runyon and Associates to do that economic impact analysis. And so we actually rely on our partners to help us with those. You know, we're a transportation agency, we're not an economic development agency. So I'd be happy to further discuss opportunities to do some more work on the economic analysis once everything is said and done, or once, you know, projecting out when the state trail is complete. But I don't currently have plans or funding to do an economic analysis similar to what we did in 2013.
Terry, do you have any networking going on with the local municipalities as far as the city, the county?
Sure.
Port, because you're gonna dump a lot of people into our area. And
Yes.
is there anything in the scope of work that we could do to work with you to be proactive?
Yeah, that's a great point. I know that the city of Hood River is concerned is maybe a little bit too rash of a word, but they're definitely thinking ahead to when the state trail will be complete. And actually, we worked with them last year to do the Cascade Avenue streetscape plan. So the Cascade Avenue is the historic highway within the city of Hood River, and we worked to see where opportunities are to provide extra space for cyclists and pedestrians through that connection into downtown and then further east to the Twin Tunnels. So there is a plan, I believe it's in the city's court now, to adopt those new cross sections and new projects into an updated TSP system. And then we'll continue to work. But yeah, we submitted our National Scenic Area permit to the county. We have an additional permit for the area outside of the National Scenic Area and within the urban boundary area for Hood River. We'll need to do some more. We'll need to submit a different permit, but we've been working with stakeholders who own land and would be affected by this. So we have a good list of folks on Morton Road and Mitchell Point Road, and working a lot with the Port of Cascade Locks on how to make sure that we can get folks safely through as well. So happy to continue networking with you all because you are one of those key stakeholders.
Karen, do you give, you mentioned tours, do you give tours to the commission, staff?
do.
And our insurance agent?
I am
He's in the room with
happy.
us.
Yeah, generally we slow down a bit in the winter months on tours, just because weather can be difficult. Sorry, my cat is saying hello. But yes, always happy to
Classic.
accommodate visitors, either on, tour that we've scheduled, or I can give you your own tour. You can have a bespoke tour. And I'm happy to work with you or staff or whoever to schedule that.
One final question. Did you find any carvings at the Mitchell Point Tunnel like you did the Twin Tunnels?
No, well,
No.
yeah, so the Mitchell Point Tunnel was blasted away before my time. I'm sorry to make folks feel old, but I don't think I was even alive when it was blasted off. But I do know that there was graffiti, and depending on your point of view, either graffiti or inscriptions immediately upon opening of the historic tunnel. And if there were any, they have gone the way of the tunnel, unfortunately.
Thank you again.
Of course.
I have a question. I see that you're expanding the Viento campground. I've seen a few people posting that they're eager to have bike camps along the way. Is that something that you guys are coordinating and planning, or how is that going to be managed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Viento, we are expanding the campground to include, and I apologize, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but hiker-biker campsites, so not vehicle related. There'll be a separate loop for folks, so there'll be lockers and like bike lock stations, and I believe a bike fix-it station at Viento to accommodate those folks. That is currently the only place along the alignment, but Ainsworth Campground is right there along the historic highway. So there are opportunities to expand that. And I think as we work to complete the state trail, we'll definitely need to look at that. There are communities along the alignment that have implemented bike hubs. So you and Hood River at the top of 2nd Street, I believe, have a fantastic bike hub with restrooms and a bike fix-it station, a water bottle fill, and some wayfinding to various bike related, as well as restaurants and breweries, et cetera. And I know that Cascade Locks and the city of Mosier are also working on their bike hubs, and Troutdale is also working on bike hubs. So I think between all of those efforts, we can really work to make sure that cyclists are accommodated and feel welcome along as we work towards completion.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time tonight. And I think maybe setting up a tour next spring would be.
Sure, I'm happy
Yeah, it'd be cool.
to make that happen.
Thank you so much.
Hey,
You're
Chair-
welcome.
Chair, before we go to the next one, I do have one question before Scott gets out of here. I'm a little concerned because at some point in time, we're going to be voting on proceeding with this invoice and bill and one. Because of the change out that we've had with the executive director and the new executive director and the timing and so on, I would like to make sure that you guys are working off the most current fracture critical report. So if we could you let us know what version you've got?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Brendan, actually, while he was sitting here, emailed the engineering department at Chubb to request some information just to kind of see this. I think your comments probably caught him. Well,
What are our renewal date?
it's a 1/1 renewal, so we are in the process. And one of the things that should have been spoken to tonight is that the insurance industry the property industry has been in a massive state of flux, as they tried to describe, but it had slowed this process down significantly. In past years, we would like to have this information to you guys kind of at the very latest by late November. Most of the calculations weren't completed until mid-December. Due to a wide variety of things, not specific to the ports account, but to the West Coast, some weather related events and things like that.
So if we get this information and they get an answer from us, not tonight, but 1 month from now, that's fine.
So nothing would change this offer in a negative way.
Mhm.
So there's not gonna be any information in there that they're not going to stand by this offer. Because they've gone, I believe they've gone through sort of the steps they need to go through. And Brendan's boss, who historically has made these meetings, he is not only the lead underwriter for Chubb's engineered risk division, he is actually one of their engineers. And he is, can also be a bit of a character. And so, for those that know Mike Giambro, he's been a force in the bridge insurance world for a long time. But that's who he emailed while he was sitting there. So we'll get some more. And kind of see, historically, those reports have come back to Chubb. Chubb has come forward and said, these things need to be addressed before we can even move forward. That didn't occur this year.
No, that's why, that kind of concerns me, and that again, with the transfer of
Yeah.
responsibility, and there was a report that popped out,
Well, they could just make it worse.
you're sure you got it?
Mhm.
We want to make sure.
I just don't want it to be a coverage problem later on if it's not. Let's get it figured out up front.
Yes, 100%.
You need insurance when you need it.
Yeah.
That's the problem, yeah.
Okay,
John, your turn.
All right, you guys, I actually have some really great news to report that while we were sitting in here, my crew actually finished the piece out there that connected the two docks.
Yeah.
We were having the issue getting them to match. The docks were built just as they were designed, but when they were put in the water and we tried to attach them together, things happened that nobody could have predicted. And we got stalled by the weather for a couple weeks. And we got busy on it again last week and came up with a solution really for the problem in-house. And the solution that we came up with was using the old steel piece between and floating that itself and connecting to the dock. And by doing so, we took the big concrete piece that was floating so high in the water that we had to figure out how to weight back down. It eliminated that piece. And tomorrow in the daylight, take a drive by and take a look at the great work that the facility staff did in repairing that. And we want to give the full credit to Ryan Clapprich and his team have just really dug in to figure out how to make this work. And I'm very impressed. So the news is good. What we have left to do is the long dock that parallels the shore. We have to slide that down 2 feet. That's really not a very big task. And then pour the abutments and the ramps that get you back up on top of the dock, and the project's done. So because we took over and did what would have been a very large change order in-house, we kept the change order down to about $700, which still fell within our budget. So pretty happy to announce that. So that's really the update I have for you.
Great.
so let
thanks.
me add on to that, because I agree too, that I think you guys did a great job recovering from a problem. But I think there's a lesson learned that we need to take away from this. And if you want to call it a quick root cause analysis of it, was that we had a bad contract up front with quote, the design outfit that really wasn't designed. And it went downhill from there. So I think the lessons learned that we need to think about is that whenever we do a contract, there needs to be at least 2 eyes reviewing it to make sure that we don't do this again. So in a nutshell, what we did is we awarded a contract for design, but didn't include design responsibility in the contract.
That is correct.
And we should have never, ever let that out of the house. But I think it's something that we can learn from and not do it again. So I would offer up, what are we going to do different to not let that happen
I can
again?
give you an answer to that, and we've already implemented it. Patty helped me create our contract administrator, helped us create a review punch list. And on that review punch list are all the date checks, name checks, all the things that you need to look at, substance, those things will be in that. And who reviewed it will be signed on that. And no contract will leave without 2 signatures on that page from here on out.
I think
That was
that's
implemented right away.
the real lessons learned, and I acknowledge that and appreciate what you guys did.
Thank you.
So I think we turned a negative into a
I
positive
think we did too.
in a couple of different ways.
I couldn't agree more. It's that double check has been needed here for a very long time.
Please express our gratitude and appreciation to your entire team.
Thank you. I will. I will.
Okay. Kevin. Executive
Alright.
Director's Report.
All right, let's take a look here. Just a couple of items that are not included in the report. One of the things I did want to bring to your attention, if you recall, the Umatilla tribe has requested a toll exemption similar to the exemption that the Nez Perce and the Yakima received. I did learn earlier this week that the Port of Cascade Locks just recently gave the Umatilla an exemption over there. Our legal counsel has been working with the legal counsel at the Umatilla, and it looks like we're getting pretty close to getting that resolved. The only area that maybe Kristen, you wanted to talk to is just the idea that the Nez Perce and the Yakima had explicit language that was, I guess, found in a Supreme Court case that allowed for that exemption. It was a little less clear for the Umatilla and Warm Springs and perhaps others about that same exemption. So I don't know if there, with Garrett, if there had been any discussion about that, or if it just kind of made sense for us just to go ahead and do the exemption as for the 4 treaty tribes out of goodwill and good nature, but feel free to add anything to that.
I think a combination, they were helpful, kind of uncovering some of the, not legislative history, but the analogous history to that council. All of those treaties, were, derived from this, essentially the same council. And the same considerations were intended to be considered. Each treaty had different transcribers. And so there was, he was able to produce enough of that historical background that suggests that the right to travel was intended to be universal. And so the combination of that and just the equity and goodwill treating the tribe equally, I think makes sense and is definitely defensible.
So, so assuming that there isn't any more discussion, we can develop that resolution and bring that to you for the adoption on the.
I just want to consider one other. I don't know. This isn't a financial question because it really doesn't matter to me. But I can't imagine there's a whole lot of trips from outside of the nations in our immediate area. I doubt we have a whole lot of trips on any given year. So if we're going to extend this to what would be the first nation outside, a little bit outside the region, should we consider just extending that to all Native American nations one time and be done with this
That'd be a
conversation?
staff question for us, logistics and everything else, and can we implement that?
Well,
talk to.
I guess what we can say, after I did my toll booth training last month, I know there is a button on there for treaty exemptions. And so I believe we are tracking those exempt trips. I don't know how many we have seen over the years, but that would be relatively easy to track down unless staff has any.
I'm just talking about the ones outside of our region. We
Or
already,
the Grand Rod.
exactly, and I don't know why if we are going to do that, I don't know why we wouldn't
Just do it.
extend this courtesy to all Native American nations. I don't care where you are. Because if it's the right thing to do for one or two, it seems the right thing to do. And at that point, it's not a financial.
I totally agree.
I agree.
I couldn't agree more. I think we owe it to them.
Well, instead of assessing tribe by tribe, just,
Yeah. If they're identified with the US government as a tribe, that's good enough for me.
Good enough. Yeah.
So if there's consensus, we'll work with legal counsel to develop a resolution that's all encompassing.
I think so, that's easier.
How does the toll takers know that somebody is from the
They have a-
Sioux Indian Nation?
They have
they
like
have
their own
a
driver's
travel
license,
card?
the
Okay.
travel card.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
I'm fine.
Great idea.
Let's do that.
Excellent, great. So then continuing on, so Budget Committee. Debbie's working on the budget calendar. We do have one term, Judy Newman, whose term is expired. Staff did reach out to Judy. No response back, so we can either offer a renewal to Judy, and if she doesn't respond or is unable to, we can, open that out. I don't know what your past policies are as far as opening up recruiting for Budget Committee members.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we get a no response or a negative response from Judy, we'll just go ahead and open it up for publication.
That's fine.
Let's see, Commissioner pay policy. So this was something that's come up a couple of times, and so staff's initial response is that instead of keeping track of if you've just been in a port commission meeting once or twice, that there will just be the full $100 paid, which is what the governance policy basically described. So if there's anything outside of that, that we wouldn't have to do any changes to just simply follow that policy internally. If there is any interest for something other than that, then I think that would be open for a discussion.
I'd like
Commissioner
to,
Strike, I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, it's difficult because we want to attract people that are interested in volunteering their time, and I think that offering some sort of compensation for that is okay. I would say for myself personally, the compensation is not something that drives me to volunteer for this board. And therefore, I feel like if other ports around are not compensating, plus if we're really trying to show to our constituents that we are trying to pinch every penny we can out of this port, I think that maybe we should consider not compensating the commissioners at all. Maybe donuts.
The reason I brought this up initially was that it was my understanding that the prior administration was cherry picking. If you didn't attend a meeting, you got no $50. I thought that was totally wrong. I mean, if you look at the amount of money we spend on our own money to be a commissioner, it's astronomical. And so that was my main intent. But if your current policy, if you interpret it that it's a flat fee, I don't care if you miss both meetings, you're still gonna get $100. If that's the way it is, I'm fine with that. I still think we should get some compensation myself. I believe the $100 is fair. I think like Mike mentioned, he's been here since 9 o'clock this morning. If we had to pay Mike hourly wage.
We would not be able to afford that.
Right, so I think, and also too, I think it just, I don't know how to address the fact that we want to draw on people to maybe work 8 to 5 to have this job, because it does cost you a lot of money. Childcare and those things.
I really don't think the port could afford to do that. To really. pay
No,
for
that's
the-
me.
for the
I agree. I don't know how to
So
address
then-
that, but I do
so-
feel it.
So what is a fair market value or half the fair market value? It's certainly not $100. But it's probably not $10,000 a year either. So if you're not really gonna try and get somewhat close to half a market value, I don't think we can afford it. So I would vote, leave it at $100.
Right, that's what my point was too, but somehow the county does figure out how to do it.
Let me make an argument for compensating commissioners. Do what you want. I also don't do this for the money. And that wasn't a consideration. However, would we as a volunteer body open up the candidate pool for future commissioners to a wider variety of experience and backgrounds if there was a modest stipend involved? That perhaps would matter to a future commissioner.
I think the answer to that is yes.
I think so too.
But I also
True.
think that the tax base that we receive really doesn't correlate to a higher compensation for commissioners. I mean, the county makes 10 times more money off of property taxes a year than, or more than that, than we do.
Yeah, but if you like Ben's point, if you have creative people who have our professional people who can afford to be here because they're offset their compensation,
Mhm,
your generation revenue is more.
this is true.
We have to rely on tax bases.
But I think that might be a separate conversation. I think the conversation we're having now is to, because I think the policy now is 100 max a month.
Yeah, I just wanted to address that we do not cherry pick one meeting, you get cut $50. That is totally wrong. It's happened to individuals I know of. And that's no longer the case, right, Kevin?
So if,
Then let's have a consensus to knock that off.
okay,
Yes.
Keep it as is, but
Yes.
maybe bring this up again
Yeah.
in
let's look at
as
it.
part of a planning in the future and kind of consider the future of that in a policy discussion sometime.
Perfect.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I have thoughts, but this isn't a discussion for it, so. But I'm fine with the $100.
Okay, anything more on that? Hearing none, just one thing I did want to just bring up, we had, we've been working with HNTV and Carrie's team on looking at different tolling scenarios, and the Washington State Transportation Commission's doing their TNR study. And one of the things that we need to take into account is we're developing, the models for the new bridge. What are the debt? What's the debt currently on the books? And one thing that I learned today is that we do have actually one loan that the payoff date isn't until after until I think 2037.
Yeah, and I was wrong on that. It's late in 2030.
2030.
So it still will be though after.
After the
So they'll
bridge
Yeah.
is up and running.
New bridge, like,
Theoretically,
yeah.
depending
A
on
small period
dates.
of time. I don't know.
So I only bring that up just because that is a loan that's out there that's backed by tolls. And so that was something that was new to me, and some of you may have known that already, but some of you may not.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I would suggest that staff take a look at. Provide some options of how do we pay that off before the new bridge comes in play. And again, I think what I heard was 1.6, 1.7 million, something in that range. But we've got time between now and another 7 years to get rid of that. And I think we ought to be talking about that.
And I did look, there's no prepayment penalty or anything like that. There's no, if we can prepay it at any time.
But again, the other thing I think we need to talk about is don't add any more debt using bridge tolls as collateral. It just,
No, it makes sense. And
that's a
then
problem.
some of the things we talked about earlier, as far as we can figure out a way to save for that at the time we need to pay it off.
So
This just crossed my mind. Is there a, and Scott may jump in there too. Is there any new laws that went into effect January 1 that will affect us? State of Oregon? Anybody know anything about it? Any new laws that affect insurance?
Additionally, is the new DMV law.
Okay.
And so that's, today we all got our pay stubs for tomorrow, and there's our little deduction for paid leave, and there's definitely some significant impacts to the availability of paid sick leave and medical leave for staff. It's a pretty big impact, and Deanna's done a great job explaining that to everybody.
Okay, good. Thank you.
let's see, and then one other thing, or two more things. One, the Gorge Regional Transit Strategy is having one of their last stakeholder advisory group meetings tomorrow from 1 to 3. As you know, there has been identified down around Lot 1, either on the Anchor Way or First Street, that there is an identified location for transit facility. And so if you are interested in getting the login information for that stakeholder meeting, let me know and I can email you the credentials for that meeting. So that's obviously something that we want to continue to monitor. It's just an advisory document, but it's something that we've utilized in our grant applications and vice versa. So as we're working on other grant applications for the bridge, in addition to bike ped elements, there's also the transit element that we've been tracking. And so that's how we're learning about some of these other other groups that are out there and developing their own individual planning documents.
There may be an interface there if we think about it, if we could figure out how to put a transit station right at the butt of the bridge on the Oregon side and then go do the same thing on the Washington side, there may be some real synergy there.
Just to remind everybody on that, what Kevin's talking about, that $1 million grant that we received to help with the infrastructure on Anchor Way requires, correct me when I get this wrong, requires us to place a transit area center as part of that particular development in that in a location that's part of the development. It does not have to be where the picture shows. It can be anywhere that we decide as we move forward, but it's going to need to be there to access that grant funding.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that was part of
Yep.
the funding strategy, and, unfortunately, we weren't successful with our $2.9 million EDA grant, but it certainly strengthened that grant application tremendously to have a public transit element incorporated as part of it. And then Columbia Area Transit, for their part, we're submitting grant applications for around $500,000 to the Federal Transit Authority to pay for the construction costs of the bus pull-out portion of our road. So it was a collaboration and partnership that was viewed favorably, even though we didn't get the funding, but it strengthened the plan.
When does that grant expire?
Well, we have two $500,000 grants.
Right,
One is the $500,000 ODOT Immediate Opportunity Grant, and the other one is the money from the pass-through money from the Coronavirus Fiscal Recovery Fund, and that was allocated to us through Senator Chuck Thompson's
Yeah.
application. They both expired June of 2020.
24.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
But, we can always ask for an extension.
One other item too, regarding the transit is that I know that we do have a resolution from a couple of years ago before my time on exempting the tolls for Mount Adams transit system. And so right now, CAT is going to be doing, we just learned daily crossings. And so one of the things that, you may be asked to do is to provide a similar exemption for CAT in addition to Mount Adams. So I just learned today that that's coming down the pike. And so just want to put that on your radar if that's requested.
Question on that. So I know that CAT receives funding from the new employer tax in the state of Oregon. Is Mount Adams funded in a similar, could we find that out? Where their funding sources come from? Because I know that CAT receives a significant amount of money from the employer tax that
That's a good point.
was implemented.
And just a little bit of context on the MATS waiver. That was immediately following an engineering study that said we could not accommodate bike and crossing on the current structure. It couldn't handle it. And MATS installed bike racks on all of their buses, and so it's a way to address the issue of low-income individuals not being able to afford the toll and providing them a free option to get across the bridge. Because you have to pay your bus fare, but you don't have to pay the toll.
Right.
Or the bus fare doesn't incorporate the toll. And then there's a bike option, a free bike option. You get in White Sand, go to the library, put your bike on the MATS bus, and you can cross the bridge.
Right.
Just some contextual.
Yeah, I understand that. And I know all the CAT buses have
They
bike.
all have it.
I'm just curious where their funding comes from and what they get. So,
Yeah, that should be pretty easy to
Okay,
to
thank you.
find. And then just the other thing too is with Scott here, with our SDO general liability. We need to get that in front of you also for approval for our general liability and other coverages for all port-wide activities. So
that was, to let the commissioners know, SDIS revised the ports, to actually two other districts in our counties renewals after the effective date of 1/1 in favor of the entity. So there was a slight additional reduction that was owed to the port at this year's renewal. And so that's why we had the renewal, and then they asked us not to send it out because they were making revisions. So what you have in front of you now is the slightly reduced, but correct. Offer or renewal.
So, and you haven't seen that yet, so that we'll be getting that to you in anticipation of a vote on the 24th. So we'll get that policy to you in advance, just like we did with the Chubb policy. If you have any questions or concerns, let Scott or myself know. But then we'll have that on the agenda for the 24th.
And that's a year,
That's a year.
January to January.
January to January.
Okay, I don't know if I want to bring this up, but the CFA. You go read the CFA. That first year. The port covers the insurance for the new directors of the new entity.
So is that like, can that be covered as a committee
So are we talking about the bridge
by state working group?
No, it's not the bi-state working group, it's the new authority, it's gonna be the Whites, Hood River White Salmon Bi-State Bridge Authority.
So it
And
is,
they come into play. Hopefully, July 1. And they have sole responsibility, but I believe the way the CFA is written. The port will provide that director insurance for a period of time. So if you're gonna revise the insurance,
We should look at
we
that.
need to get that in there.
so my understanding, and this is dealing with some conversations with all the people involved, including SDIS, they would provide a separate policy for that organization. Unless it is the port's intent to have it as part of the Port of Hood River. It was, up until this point, I thought it was the intent that it would be its own entity. And thereby sort of be underwritten on its own terms through SDIS.
Okay, all I'm saying, and I.
Yep.
I'm beyond my level of expertise here, but when I read the CFA. The way I interpret it is the port will provide that insurance for it. Now, whether it's a separate policy, don't know.
I think the intent would be to pay the premium probably.
Right.
And the good news is that certainly in the first 12 months of that entity being organized. There's not going to be much premium involved at all.
Yeah, it'd be like the director's insurance is about it.
Yep.
So that's something we can follow up with HNTB just to see that Bill only is identifying attorneys for the bi-state working group for their legal
I
representation,
read that.
which will be
That's
separate.
good.
Okay, so let me just add that to the to-do list. Okay, I think that is it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'm gonna circle back. Actually, there's a couple of consent items that were moved down. I kind of skipped that. So, C and D. Commissioner Fox.
Okay, so item number C, which is approved mortgage use agreement with Lindbald Expeditions. When I read through the document, I had kind of one question and a comment. And the question that I had is that we're proposing to take the per occurrence charge to $350 per visit and use of the facility. And I ask you, how does that compare to other stops along the Columbia? Are we in the market with $350?
We are, we're a little on the higher end for some. I don't have the exact number for the Kalama stops. They have an exclusive agreement with ACL. And I'm not sure what they're charging for that.
Yeah,
stop.
ACL don't care about, but this one, what are the other charges that you've seen?
And so we're looking at Cascade Locks is $250 a stop, and that includes water, but not anything else. Astoria is $238, Clarkston's $250, Skamania's $150, the Dalles is $150. Camas does it by the foot, which is $2 a foot, and the Lindblad vessels are typically between 100 to 125 feet long. They're much smaller.
So it's,
So we're.
let's
on
say
the high-
250, we're on the high side.
Yeah.
But probably not enough to get them to stop using this.
They like this stuff. So I don't think they're priced
Okay.
out, and how I came up with that was looking at the pricing that we're charging for American Cruise Lines. and trying to find something somewhat equitable.
Okay. Okay, you answered my question on that one. The second issue that I've got with this is not something that affects us today, but I think the port needs to start looking at it right now. And what that is, on the map up here, the drawing, this is our marina. And the only moorage or the dock that this outfit can use is this one right there. So they have to come into the marina. They cannot use this one that ACL does. It's a dedicated source for them. Nobody else can use it. My concern is when we start constructing the bridge, we're gonna have barges and all kinds of stuff out here. And I'm concerned about bringing a large ship into this area while that's under play. So I think we ought to assign somebody to start looking at what are some options for us, which could be doing something out here. We got to look at, you know, the depth out here and whatnot. Can we find a location that they could use out here, start looking at a deal with them to, like ACL did, to put in a dock out here and they pay a big piece of it. Yep.
We'd have to
Maybe if the
dredge.
vessels are much older and have a greater depth when they draw.
Okay, I'm not saying necessarily here, I'm just saying we gotta go look at some options. And if we believe that sometime earliest is probably 25 for us to start construction, we got
Mhm.
roughly 2 years, 2.5 years before we're gonna have to shut them off from coming in here, and we're gonna lose that business. And the region is gonna lose that business. So I think we got a 2-year period to figure this out and come up with a solution, but we need to start now. If we wait 2 years, we're looking in the rearview mirror and here we go again. We're gonna shut things off and we're gonna lose some potential.
I have a
some
question. The Best Western dock, that's controlled by the Best Western? Okay.
Might put it to them, this is coming down the road. Start thinking, because
Their dock needs
Their dock needs work, but
their dog needs work, but I know these companies in the past have proposed spending a significant, not this new one, but. They've proposed spending a good amount of money to put in a dock. Now they've proposed it in locations that we're never gonna go along with, but I think the interest might be there. If we, put it in front of them.
That's a
I
valid
agree with
point.
you.
It's existing
mhm,
and it's an upgrade for them.
Yeah.
And
it's
they have a
deep over
tangible
there.
asset when they're all done, moved out, not using it anymore. You go back to that location, yeah.
So I think this could be part of our strategy we talked about. How can we develop this into a real business that supports the port, but also the rest of the tourist industry?
Mhm.
And this could be the catalyst to get us off top dead center and let's go. And we got a time frame that we got to meet,
Mhm.
or we're going to lose it.
Probably a good idea, even regardless of the new bridge. Probably a good idea.
Yeah.
For the future of landing tourists right there.
one other thing, that there's some really interesting property lines. Not that that has to be the only spot, but the other spots we have kind of ruled out don't work. But the port doesn't own
Oh, DSL.
some of
lines.
those.
Oh, that's right.
parts of land that-
So
It's really the
I would
whole point
offer up-
from the bathroom, how we do.
I would offer up to you, don't let that hold us up as an option. Maybe we go buy it. So we pay a little bit to be able to generate some revenue. That may be a really good thing to buy. I don't know, but we ought to look at it.
As part of that analysis, should we do a financial feasibility as well?
Yeah,
Seems logical.
It look like I'm a couple, 3 proper docks right there.
Right.
Seems like every time we talk about that, we look, there's some reason why we can't though.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's those property lines. We
Yeah.
don't own that. We'd either have to lease it or own it, probably.
Yeah.
But if we beg the question,
And then if we
Well,
owned it, then I can see all kinds of opportunities to pave this and make it really nice.
mhm,
and put something out there to grab the people coming off the ships. Right now, they go right on a bus and they're gone.
I bet you something of those property lines in there somewhere has a little bit to do with marina launch where you can and can't, different things as well.
We could solve that at the same
Yeah.
time.
Okay,
Take a look at it.
what did you want to talk about on the
Did you,
donation and fee waiver?
yeah, did you want to do the Lindblad? Do you want to do the motion for Lindblad?
I was, oh, you need one of those?
Yeah.
I was gonna do all those, I didn't see that.
That should be on page 67.
I'm
Yeah.
personally okay with what we just talked about on the 350. That was my major question that impacts tonight.
Page, do I need to do that? I'll make a motion.
67.
67. Somebody want to go ahead and
I
we
can
can just
make a
take care of that
motion.
right now.
I make a motion to approve the 2023 mortgage use agreement with Lindblad Expeditions LLC, subject to legal review.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I as well, that will pass,
Commissioner, for the sake of time, we do have Elaine on the phone.
Mhm.
you are.
Elaine Howard. She's the one that did this urban renewal analysis. We only got her for a little bit. Can we bump that item?
I'll just put D and F when we get down to action.
Yeah.
That's fine, but
Yeah.
is this, yeah, let's,
Yes, so because we only have her until 7:30 at the latest. So if you can go to page 151 in the packet.
we might be here at 7.
I'll give you a second to find it. We're jumping around. While you're looking for page 151, this is an analysis that Elaine helped the board with regarding the waterfront urban renewal district. And there were two options that came out of that. One was to try to extend the term or the lifespan of the current urban renewal district. Or two, a second option was to close down the waterfront urban renewal district and then allow that property to go to the west side urban renewal, which is where the city's focus is. But then actually approach the city about just doing a standalone urban renewal district for the lot 1 parcel. And so the memo that Elaine produced, basically her recommendation is that we approach the city about forming a new single property urban renewal agency, basically just for lot 1. It's the port's property at the frozen base is 0. It'll, over the course of 10 years, we would generate over $1 million that would offset our upfront costs regarding the engineering and development of Anchor Way and First Street. So Elaine is here. We didn't know, we didn't think we'd have the time to do a full-on presentation. But if you have any questions about that, Elaine is here and staff is recommending that we do approach the city about the single lot urban renewal concept, district concept. But if there's any question, we wanted to make sure Elaine was here to answer any questions that you might have.
it sounds like this is reimbursable funds, so it doesn't slow us down at all.
Mhm.
We can get going and be reimbursed should this district be active, correct?
So a question that we have is that if this single property urban renewal is going to require going through an election and a vote by the community to be able to put in place, is that true?
No,
How do they do it? Is it just by edict by the vote of the council at Hood River?
yes,
Isn't it 70% of the taxing
no, because it's a small adjustment, not a major.
It's minor.
Or a
It-
minor
it's a-
amendment, not a major.
Okay, so kind of the second piece of the question is, let's say it takes a year for this to get through the city council. And they say, yes, we're good to go. If we start working on it today and we incur some costs, can we go back retroactively before it gets approved to tap into that money?
May I answer?
I hope so.
Yeah. If you end up having to pay for the cost of the preparation of the urban renewal plan and report, which I think in the conversations with the city, they had anticipated that, you can reimburse that part, the preparation of the plan and report. If you start doing planning studies, engineering studies, that kind of information, that is not by statute reimbursable until the plan is actually adopted. And I'm going to go back to the earlier question. This would be a whole new plan, and a new plan can be approved by the city council itself. It does not need concurrence of other taxing districts.
Generally, how long would you expect to take this plan to be written and approved?
6 months.
Okay.
Because of the public process that's involved, there are a number of required, statutorily required meetings. So 6 months is a time frame that works.
Don't we already have our grant is for that first phase, correct? The stuff is non-reimbursable, like the engineering and development, which is non-reimbursable by this,
Right.
But we
already have the funds for that. And so what we're talking about essentially is having urban renewal in place for phase 2.
So as long as we're not out there actively digging or doing something, and we wait to physically do that work until after the plan's approved and we get this thing through the city, we're good to go. We're good to be able to get reimbursed.
Is digging a hole reimbursable even if we do it before the district is in place? No. Okay. Then yeah, I guess yes.
Okay. Now, Elaine, the city will be the facilitator on this single property.
They have not agreed to anything, but legally, if they agree, it is the city council who has the authority to do an urban renewal plan.
Right.
The port in Oregon, a port does not have the authority to do it. So the city council has to be the implementing agency.
Right. But does the city, they will facilitate and they will allocate administrative costs to the job or to the single property urban renewal district. Is that correct? They will manage that?
If it is adopted, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question, but I do now. If it is adopted and there are administrative costs to managing the area, it would, because the city implements it, it would be their responsibility to pay for those administrative costs of implementing the area. I have worked in Coos County where the county then contracted back with the port to actually do that implementation because all of the activity was on the port's properties. And so there was a mutual agreement between the two. So I think those kinds of things could be discussed with the city, but legally it's their, if they adopt it, it's their urban renewal area. They have all of the legal and administrative responsibilities unless they contract those away.
And the reason I asked that, Elaine, we had a situation in years past, I chaired urban renewal, that the city administrator was allocating funds as his time to certain districts that we felt weren't appropriate. And I want that to happen on this partial here. So how do we have any authority to facilitate, to overlook how that allocation of spending is being done?
You don't have authority other than you do have a place on the agency board. One of your members is a member of the agency board. So that person can have input in those things. If the city agrees to move forward with this, I think certainly part of that agreement can be looking at the potential projects and administrative costs to the area. So I think that all of that is negotiable as you move forward.
Thank you.
I've got one last question for you, Elaine. From a city point of view, what's the benefit to them of approving us as a single property urban renewal area? Why would they do it? What's the benefit to the city?
When we first started talking about this, the amount of money would be allocated to all of those public benefit projects that go with Lot 1. So there are, there's an outlook, there's a trail, there's, and they all add up about to this $1.7 million. So it's allocating that money to those projects that benefit the citizens as a whole and are projects that the city wants done. Those projects also help you then find a developer who wants to develop on that site.
Okay, thank you.
And also it's shrinking the waterfront district. So allowing more acreage.
Correct.
That's correct.
Mhm.
West Cascade.
Yeah.
One thing to bear in mind, guys, is that I believe we're the only urban renewal district in the state of Oregon that has port commissioners on it. Usually the city council, so we have to make sure that if in fact we move forward with this, that we have some type of checks and balances with these two individuals. Stay on it.
Right.
Important to us.
So I think if the commission agrees with the general approach, it's really just an introductory conversation with the city to find out. There'll be a lot more coming at you as far as costs and requirements and all of that, but just wanted to make sure that we're on the right track, and
I think we are.
if we get the right motion, then we'll start tomorrow.
So I'll make a motion if we're ready for it.
I think on that, you just need consensus on that tonight, or do you need a motion?
You know, I would prefer to have it in the record as a motion so that if there's any question.
Okay, so I move that we authorize staff to request formation of a single property urban renewal district for Lot 1 development.
I'll second.
Comment?
Yeah. Elaine, is this one of the best ways we can move forward with our development on Lot 1 in your professional opinion?
I think it is both in your advantage and in the city's advantage.
Okay.
The city is able to close down the district, as one of your commissioners said, to return all that money to all the taxing districts, to be able to use that acreage in their west side area. For you, you're able to have some reimbursement of the costs for developing Lot 1. If you have the resources or think that you have a developer who may have the resources to upfront, it does require that someone does upfront costs that you will get reimbursed from once that tax increment comes in. So it's not one of those traditional areas where the tax increment funds the improvements up front. You won't have that because your property value is zero. So it does, but this does work. And in my mind, this is best for both parties.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion
I
and a second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye as well. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Yep, thank you.
Do you want to go back up to consent D? Did we?
Okay, on item D, my concern shows up on page 77 of the package. And if you look at page 77, about 3/4 of the way down the page, there's a paragraph that starts out, starting on January 15, 2023. The concern that I have here is that this is for a 1-year new lease, but there's options to extend. I think this paragraph is really unclear on how you handle cost on extensions. And it needs to be kind of cleaned up a bit. And the way it's worded, one could say, if you go into an extension year, you're going to have different rates every month because it's based on the last 12-month rolling window. So some of the windows are fixed at the first year rate. And then the way this is written, you could say the first month of the extension is at X and it's based on 12 months plus 6%. The second month is based on a 6% growth, but it's on the previous 12 months, which includes 1 month at a higher rate. So the concern that I have here is it's very unclear. I think administratively, it's going to take you more to manage this instead of going with a flat 6% step up in year 2. If you go to year 3, it's a 6% step up for year 3. It's just unclear. I think we just need to clean it up before we issue it out.
Yeah, it sounds like lease rate could be different every single month.
Mhm.
In an extension, yeah.
So I haven't had a chance to meet with Kristen yet, but talking with, perhaps Kristen, the best path for the language, and then working with Kevin on what he thinks we can address that. And I think this, if we redo this paragraph and then just go with a flat fee, if we choose to have an option for the yacht club to renew this particular lease, or whether it's better to just take this renew option out.
I think the other lessons learned here is what we learned a little earlier. Your checklist that you were talking about as far as reviewing contracts, did you use that checklist going through this?
No.
Okay, so I think that's a systematic issue that the port needs to work on. So there ought to be a second eye on this thing before it even comes here to catch this kind of stuff. And I'm not blasting you. I'm trying to improve the process.
So would it be possible to, because I don't think anyone has a problem with lease rates or the terms, it's just a bit of clarification. So would it be possible for us to approve the lease upon legal review? And if there needs to be an adjustment on some language?
Counselor's saying yes.
Okay,
I think that'd be the wise way to do this. They don't have to bring it back to us, just get
Right.
it cleaned up and move forward. So that's
Right.
just fine. Go ahead.
oh, then I'll make a motion to approve the lease with Hood River Yacht Club in the Marina Maintenance Building for the terms 23-24 upon legal review.
Second,
I'll say,
all in favor?
I,
I as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And donation and fee waiver policy, do we need to talk about that?
We just put that down to Sheriff Calhoun. And we weren't here in the beginning, and this would be consent.
Uh-huh.
And so we thought we should put down to action in case you had any comments or questions on it before we move forward with it. So that's all that by that.
I actually do now, because of what you said earlier on one of
Oh,
the
it's
other
under
issues.
consent, so it's the,
Page 87.
I think I wrote some.
And the issue the question that I've got, we're talking about a number of different groups and organizations. Some of those organizations get money elsewhere. I think we ought to talk about which ones are getting other like state and federal money. Why should we also basically give them a free ride? We need the revenue where we can get the revenue. So if their costs are getting paid by a grant or some other program, we shouldn't supplement that. In my opinion, if it's not, then I'm more willing to say, yeah, let's forgive and give them free access.
Would you include private sponsored corporate sponsorships in that, or are you talking about just public funding?
I think all of the above. So if you have a corporate sponsor that's paying those costs, let them pay it. If you've got federal or state money that's paying those costs, let them do it. If you don't, and it's still a nonprofit, then I'm much more willing to put in a share and say, yeah, no lease.
that's a slippery slope in my opinion, only because it disincentivizes people to go out and get corporate sponsorships and private funding if they know, hey, I can get this free lease if I don't go for a sponsor. I don't know, I'm torn on that one.
So you would more say,
I just think it needs to be a
Charge the land.
blanket policy, and what other funds that they're able to pull from other revenue sources, it's good on them. but I think we need to make it very generic, I guess, for lack of a better word. Otherwise, people are gonna start to, you
I
know,
agree. I think it should be more, a little less subjective and something a little easier for
Some
Daryl to
boilerplate.
navigate.
That's the whole reason that we, put this out there to bring. For you, for you guys to look at, because the last time it was really looked at was 2014, and so much has changed on the waterfront since
Oh, yeah.
2014. But in the agreements, we have really long relationships with a lot of these support groups. And so, but then you have other groups where they're kind of the same thing, and it's all over the map. So we wanted to really have something that was kind of just easy for staff to look at, easy for the commission, easy for the people applying for it, where we were really focused on benefits to the community. And so it's a pretty, extensive amount of research, we're trying to come up with something we could really support the groups that we have, but yet be fair. So I think, in my opinion, we overcomplicate that. I'm not sure how we can.
Well, the other way to look at it, and it's kind of taking a real hard approach, and I get it. The bridge is going away. We're spending $3.5 million of money that we're not gonna have to support all of this stuff that we do. The people that are using that we're talking about is taking up much more space of really good land. And we're not getting any revenue off of it, or we would not get any revenue off of it if we go down this route. Are we setting ourselves up just to create a bigger problem down the road as far as being able to pay for what we're doing?
Like this proposal that we would be getting revenue, or we haven't in the past, any revenue, but with the cap of $500 per organization or per event. So we've got two things. We've got concessions and then we have events, but a $500 cap. They would still have to pay whatever we look at as a fair market value. So that's why I use the comps for the hook, for the concessions of what they would pay if they had that space, but because of, what they're doing being different.
Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I read it wrong, and if so, I apologize, I'm getting old, but when I looked down at the hook, I thought what we were talking about, some of those entities, we were considering not charging anything for.
No, we haven't in the past.
Yeah, the nonprofit.
We got the
Okay.
one.
Going the other way, I'm kind of trying to slowly.
I'll go back to sleep. All right.
Staff appreciates the questions because we want to really make sure we're all on the same page, and really, if you guys have feedback of how we can do it better, that's great. We're just trying to clean up things so that, again, really easy for people to look at and have consistency and again, supporting things in our community that we have for a long time, but at the same time, working towards each location being sustainable.
I just want to get closer to where policy makes it very easy for you to answer a question from any user group, and they want to come stand here and have a problem with it. That's great, but it's on us, not on you, every time you
right.
answer a question. So, and I agree, less subjective, and
Yeah, I agree with that. Simplicity and standardization really makes the staff's job a lot easier. And it makes it consistent with our constituents too, and our user groups. Yeah.
so what do you need from us to make that happen?
Recommendation
This?
is on page 91.
Anyone would like to make that motion, they can do so.
I will make a motion to approve the resolution of 2022-23-5, amending the port donation and fee waiver policy.
Again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I as well. Thank you, Daryl.
Thanks, Darrell.
Lost my cheat sheet. All right, so got that one out of there. That one's. Michael. Project delivery approach.
Yes, sir.
So we went through an analysis, looked at the 5 methods to deliver the project, which is yours. And I'm gonna try not to use acronyms. If I do, just ask me what I meant. You have the standard design bid build, which is you design the project.
One break in with Aquaporт.
You have a design build, which is another conventional where you design it, you lump sum, or partially design it and lump sum. In the contract based on the dollars. And then you have CMGC, which is a collaborative method. But it's a separate contract between the contractor and the designer and the agency, and then progressive design build, where it is a collaborative method, but it's one contract, and then you have P3. We went through an analysis of that. There's in your packet, we looked at 13 factors against those 5 options. And then evaluating those options and different criteria, came out with progressive design build as what we would recommend the delivery method be for this project. And that's really the action in front of you is to approve us to move forward with a progressive design build. We've had that discussion also with the state working group, and they concurred with that recommendation. And we're now just bringing that to you and approve it to move forward.
And that was quite an extensive discussion.
It was that, and sorry, I'm trying to brief to where we are, but we also did a industry outreach, where we had over 80 participants from nationally. And we've also done 20 one-on-one more in-depth discussions with contractors and designers. The vast majority of those said because of the way we have the funding and the type of project that a collaborative approach like CMGC or progressive would be the way to go. And that would be one of the methods they would be most interested in pursuing.
The one question I had in looking at it was, does going with that approach change the responsibility, either financial or time wise, of the Port of Hood River specifically? In any way that we need to know about?
It does not. I mean, all of it would still require review and oversight. In progressive versus CMGC, the reason in going progressive is it's one contract that we would be managing, where CMGC would be 2 contracts. So that was one of the benefits of progressive. The other benefit is that you bring them in early, so it's a much more collaborative and you're allocating risk as you go rather than design build where you're not doing that. So I think it's actually less oversight by doing progressive and going single contract.
I think progressive also gives us a lot more flexibility as funding comes in.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about it. If magically we got $520 million tomorrow, and we hadn't made this decision, we'd go design build. We're done. That's probably not going to happen. So the most flexibility is to go progressive design build. It gives you all the benefit of building constructability into the design by the person that's going to build it. But you don't pay for all of that cost as you go.
And the other thing with progressive, so just one more piece of that is you're developing the contract and the plans and developing the cost. If at any point we don't like the cost that we get from the contractor that's part of the team, we can choose to take that design and put it out for a competitive bid and have others bid on that project. So it does give us a lot of flexibility and off ramps and just flexibility is the key, I think, for those projects.
I just really appreciate the massive thoroughness that went into this analysis. So I think it's very helpful. Thank you.
We do need a
We
motion.
need a motion on that. If anyone would like to make it.
Eric made like 3.
You're doing a good job.
I need to find it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the use of progressive design build as the delivery method for the replacement bridge.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot.
Do we need to circle back to then the Chubb policy? There's a potential action item there.
Yeah.
I think I heard regardless of whether information comes back with,
Well,
it's
Make
not,
sure that-
they're gonna stand behind this and it's not gonna affect anything in a negative way for us.
I'm not convinced. I would really personally like to see a confirmation that you've got the most current, and if not, we get you the most current.
Oh, we got the motion with that verbiage in there.
Yeah. We could do it that way.
Sure.
Because it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the proposal that we have in front of us isn't going to go up. But potentially with additional information,
It's likely not gonna go down.
okay.
He said it for 2 hours to say that line.
I think the concern from Chubb's position was hearing Commissioner Fox's comments, kind of, that is sort of the underwriting flare going on, right? Like,
Mhm.
God, maybe we haven't seen everything. Is it worse than we thought or worse than we understood? I've been following some emails here since that point. I think we're totally fine, but the reality is they've made this offer on their underwriting decision.
Gotcha.
And in the last email that I read from Brennan's boss was, this is 40 years in the making. Those numbers we're, no matter literally what that report came back, I guess what Wayne said, we're good to go.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that every question is answered and everybody feels comfortable. So whatever,
I just don't want to have a problem with it.
trust me, nor do I.
So do you want to, are you comfortable making that motion with
Sure.
the amended language?
What page is that thing on?
You'll find it on.
160, oh, no, actually, it's not, it's
It's on
actually on
the-
the agenda.
Yes,
It's on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I move that we approve the Chubb Bridge Insurance Policy for 2023 as presented in the amount not to exceed $379,729, subject to confirmation that the insurance provider is using the most current or is knowledgeable of the most current fracture critical inspection report.
Good job.
I'll
Second.
second.
All in favor?
I,
Bye.
Aye as well. Okay, thank you.
It's fine.
Don't see any committee reports this evening. I glossed over that. There's not many of those on there. Was there anything from? Nope. We got through it all. Anything from Commissioner Strike,
No.
Commissioner Fox? Commissioner Gary?
Happy New Year.
Real quick, yeah, yes, there is. Christie brought up a really interesting thing about what Tara said about bike camping. That may be a revenue stream for us too, like Marina Green, we got the showers there. Portable lockers for bikers coming through on this gorgeous scenic road.
Hmm.
We may want to look at that as revenue stream that doesn't really damage us. It's seasonal. And we get the land for it, and the shower's already there, revenue stream. So we may want to look at that in the future.
Yeah, I saw historical pictures of bike or of camps along the historic highway.
But you know, they had an actual campground
Yeah.
reserve on their website ahead
Uh-huh.
of time, had showers. Maybe a good revenue stream for us, and it's clean, it really is. And they
Well-
walk the downtown, spend their money.
Yeah, and I think that the concern that I had that I didn't articulate as well as I wanted to is that. There's one thing for paid bike campers or pedestrian campers and camp facilities and all of that. And there's another thing of just camping on the side of the road and the problems that can arise.
Right.
It's best to have it organized.
It is best to have it
Yeah.
organized.
You know,
Exactly.
a little bit of follow on to that, the new bridge by State Working Group is looking at some opportunities to go for a grant, a planning grant to connect the Washington side trail system to the bridge
Mhm,
and something on the Oregon side and something on the Washington side to do the same thing.
mhm.
And we're likely to go after that. That's probably worth a couple $1 million. But that would help us connect
Mhm.
the port up on the hill
Connect all the dots.
down to here, connect all the dots, and we think that would help us going forward with some of the other federal grants for the bridge. If we could show that there's a plan to connect everything.
Good call.
Absolutely. Okay, got it?
That's it.
All right, then with that, we will recess.
Do you want me to go over directives? I've got a list of things that.
Yeah.
Just to be careful. If you don't want me to, I can studiously take.
If it's not, yeah, I guess we should do that. It's on my list. I just like skipping.
All right, well,
That's almost like a page.
I was writing down. I don't know if anybody else was, but somebody check.
I got two notes.
Do you have, I'll go through it, then you can correct me if I go off the rails, okay? So one item that we'll do is we'll take a look at the Mount Adams transportation funding sources. We will I'll follow up with Tara to schedule a tour for the commission likely in the spring. We're gonna follow up with Columbia Insurance on making sure that they've got the correct, most up-to-date ODOT report. Was there something regarding that? Are we good on the payment, commission payment, or is there anything more to do on that?
No, just it's gonna be a flat fee.
Yep, so that one's good. Options for paying off the loan before the bridge goes away. I'll send that transit link for the stakeholder meeting to you for the meeting tomorrow at 1. The bridge, and they'll follow up with Scott on the Bridge Authority insurance coverage for the directors. And then look at options for the Lindblad docking and financial feasibility at some point in the near future.
Can I ask one quick, the vessel that you're looking to redock, what is the size of it?
That particular cruise line is between like 100, 125, and I think they have a 150. The ACL vessel, they're 200 to 250.
I'm working on the Best Western on the dock.
I might be in doubt.
How'd I do it?
The only other one was to implement quality control protocols for document review. For not just contract, but other binding agreements.
Perfect.
And look at the feasibility of bike camping.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks, Greg.
Okay, that's it. Sure, I think. I'll hear about it if not.
All right, we'll recess regular session and enter executive session under ORS 1926602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions. ORS 1926602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. And ORS 1926602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal right and duty of a public body in regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed.